Level 1, the beginning. You meet her on a Tuesday. You're 24 years old. You're at a friend's birthday party in an apartment that smells like cheap beer and someone's attempt at cooking. She's standing near the window laughing at something somebody said, and you think she's the most interesting-looking person you've ever seen in a room. You don't mean beautiful, though she is. You mean interesting. Like there's something behind her eyes that would take years to fully understand. You're right about that part. You just don't know yet what kind of years those will be. You talk for 3 hours. You miss the part of the party where the birthday cake comes out. Your friend gives you a look on the way home, and you tell him it's nothing. You're lying. You both know you're lying. You call her 2 days later. She answers on the second ring. That detail will matter to you for the rest of your life in ways you can't explain. You date for 2 years. They are the best 2 years of your adult life. Not because nothing goes wrong. Things go wrong constantly, because that's what happens when two real people spend real time together. But because every time something goes wrong, you fix it together. That feels important. You think that means something permanent about the two of you. You propose on a Saturday morning in the kitchen of your shared apartment, which is not romantic by any conventional measure. You don't have a ring yet. You have a cup of coffee and a sentence you've been rehearsing for 3 weeks. She says yes before you finish the sentence. You get married at 26. The wedding costs more than you can afford. You don't care. Your father gives a toast that makes your mother cry. You dance badly, but you don't care about that either. You go to bed that night thinking this is the shape your life will have from now on. A fixed point. Everything else gets built around this. You are not wrong about that. You are just wrong about what gets built. Level 2, the early marriage. The first year is harder than anyone told you it would be. Not because you don't love each other. You do. But love and logistics are two different problems, and you've been solving the love problem your whole relationship without ever fully addressing the logistics. Now you live together permanently, with shared finances and shared chores, and the specific intimacy of watching someone be sick or tired or mean in a way they'd never let you see before. You fight about money. Not because you don't have enough. You have enough, barely, but because you grew up understanding money differently. Your family saved everything and spent nothing. Her family spent everything and saved nothing. Neither of you has the language yet to explain this to each other without it sounding like an accusation. You fight about her mother. Her mother calls every day. You say nothing for 8 months, and then one day you say something, and it comes out wrong, and the next 3 weeks are the hardest 3 weeks of your marriage so far. You make up. You always make up in those years. That's what you remember about the early marriage, not the fights, but the making up. The specific feeling of being forgiven by someone who could have chosen not to forgive you. You buy a house at 29. It's the wrong house in the right neighborhood, which is the best compromise you can afford. The kitchen is too small. You tell each other you'll renovate eventually. You never do renovate. You love that kitchen anyway. You have a daughter at 31. She arrives on a Wednesday at 6:47 in the morning, which is an inconvenient time to be born, but she doesn't ask you about that. You hold her for the first time, and something rearranges in your chest that is never rearranged back. You become someone different in that delivery room. Not better, not worse. Just different. Permanently. You name her Claire. She has her mother's eyes. You do not have the vocabulary for what that does to you. Level 3, the middle years. This is the level nobody talks about honestly. Not the honeymoon, not the crisis. The middle. The long, flat stretch of a marriage where nothing is dramatically wrong and nothing is particularly right, and you're both so tired from the actual logistics of living that you forget to look at each other the way you used to. You're 34. You work too much. You know you work too much, and you keep working too much because the alternative is addressing the thing underneath the working too much, and you are not ready for that conversation. You're not even ready to know what that conversation is. She works too. She went back to work when Claire was 8 months old, and she built something she's proud of, and you are proud of her, but you've never told her that properly. You file that in the category of things you'll say eventually. Claire is 3. She is the most demanding and delightful creature you have ever encountered. She wants everything explained, and she wants to do everything herself, and she says your name in a way that bypasses every wall you have. She does not know she is the only thing holding a certain version of your marriage together. She should never have to know that. You and your wife go on a date night for the first time in months. You sit across a restaurant table from each other and order food and talk about logistics. Claire's preschool, the roof that needs repair, the vacation you keep planning and not taking. Halfway through the main course, you realize you haven't asked each other a real question in so long that you don't know what your real questions even are anymore. She reaches across the table and takes your hand. You hold it. You don't say anything. Neither does she. You both understand something in that silence that neither of you is ready to say out loud. You drive home. You pay the babysitter. You check on Claire, who is asleep with her arms thrown wide like she owns the whole bed. You go to your own room and lie in the dark, and you think about the woman sitting across that restaurant table, and you think about the woman at the window of the birthday party 10 years ago, and you wonder when exactly those became two different women. You don't ask yourself the harder question yet. The harder question is when exactly you became two different people. Level 4, the unraveling. It doesn't happen the way it happens in movies. There's no single moment, no confession, no door slamming. It's slower than that. It's a series of small choices made over months, each one individually defensible and collectively devastating. She starts going to a book club on Thursday nights. You're supportive, genuinely. You like that she's doing something for herself. You don't ask enough questions about it. That's not an accusation. You just don't ask enough questions. You've gotten out of the habit of asking questions. You start going to the gym in the early mornings. That's healthy objectively. But you notice that part of what you like about it is the hour before anyone needs anything from you. That's the part you don't examine too closely. Claire starts kindergarten. She comes home every day with drawings and questions and a running commentary on the geopolitics of 5-year-old social dynamics. She is thriving. You hold on to that. The conversation happens on a Sunday. Not a fight, a conversation. You're in the kitchen, the too small kitchen you never renovated, and she turns to you with an expression you've never seen before, and she says she needs to tell you something. She hasn't done anything wrong. She wants you to know that first. Nobody cheated, nobody lied about anything concrete. But she hasn't been happy for a long time, and she needs you to hear that. Really hear it. Not fix it, not defend yourself against it. Just hear it. You hear it. You also hear what she's not saying yet. And the gap between what she said and what she's not saying is wide enough to lose everything in. Level 5, the trying. You try. Both of you try. You go to couples therapy for 8 months. The therapist is a quiet man in his 50s with kind eyes and a very expensive hourly rate. He is good at his job. He identifies with precision the patterns that brought you here. He gives them names. He gives you tools. He tells you that the work isn't done in this room. It's done at home, and he's right about that. Some sessions you leave holding hands. Some sessions you drive home in silence, so thick you can feel it on your skin. You keep going. That matters. The going matters even when it doesn't seem to be working. You take the vacation you kept not taking. Greece. 7 days. You booked it 2 months into therapy because the therapist said do something different, and Greece was the most different thing you could think of. Claire stays with your mother. You and your wife sit on a terrace above a blue sea and drink wine and talk for hours. For 4 of those 7 days you are the people you used to be. You remember her laugh. She remembers how you look at her when you're not performing any version of yourself. You hold each other at night, and you both think maybe this is the turn. Maybe this is the thing that pivots it back. You come home. 2 weeks later you're back in the patterns. Not because Greece didn't matter. It mattered. But you can't live in Greece. You live in the house with the kitchen you never renovated and the mortgage and the Tuesday night school pickup and the Thursday night book club and all the accumulated weight of a life that has gotten ahead of 2 people who forgot to keep talking. She moves into the guest room in November. She says it's temporary, for some space to think. You agree. You tell each other it's temporary because neither of you is ready for what it means if it isn't temporary. Claire doesn't notice for 2 weeks. When she notices, she asks why mommy is sleeping in the other room. Your wife tells her they're taking turns, so neither of them hogs the blanket. Claire accepts this. Children accept things that make enough surface sense. That gets harder as they get older. Level 6, the decision. She tells you in January. You're sitting at the kitchen table where you've had every important conversation of your marriage, and she tells you she doesn't think the marriage can be saved. She says it without anger. She says it the way you say something that has been true for a long time, and you're only just finding the words. You don't argue. You want to argue. You have arguments ready. The good years, the Greece trip, the therapy, Claire, all of it. But you look at her face and you understand that she has already done all the arguing in her own head over months while you were still hoping. She's not making a decision. She's telling you a decision she already made. You ask her if there's anything you could have done differently. She says yes. She also says it wouldn't have been enough. You sit with that for a long time. You call a lawyer the next day. The lawyer is a woman who speaks in calm, practical sentences about a process that is going to dismantle everything you built in 12 years. She tells you what to expect. You write it down. You can't read your own handwriting afterward. You tell your parents on a Saturday. Your mother cries. Your father doesn't say much, which means he's devastated. You grew up in a family where devastation looks like silence. You tell your friends. Some of them are better at this than others. One of them says, "I saw it coming." And you forgive him for that because he meant it as comfort and it didn't land that way, but you forgive him anyway. You and your wife tell Claire together. She's 6 years old. You sit on the couch in the living room, both of you beside her, and you tell her in the simplest language you can find that mommy and daddy aren't going to live together anymore, but that you both love her exactly the same amount, and that is never going to change. She asks if it's because of something she did. You tell her no. You tell her it is absolutely, completely, in every possible way not because of her. You tell her that 3 times. She nods. She seems to accept it. She asks if she can go watch television. Children accept things that make enough surface sense, but they carry what they've accepted in ways you won't understand until years later, when Claire is 16 and asks you a question about that day that you weren't ready for. Level 7, the process. The divorce takes 14 months. Not because it's contested, it's not, mostly, but because 14 months is how long it takes to divide a life. The house, the savings, the retirement accounts, the car, the furniture. Who gets the kitchen table? You get the kitchen table. You asked for it specifically. She understood why without you having to explain. You move into an apartment in March. It's a 1-bedroom in a building that smells like other people's cooking. You set up Claire's room before you set up your own. Her room has a bed and a dresser and a poster she chose herself and a nightlight she's had since she was 2. Your room has a mattress on the floor for the first 2 weeks. You learned to cook. You knew how to cook before, but you knew how to cook for 2 people who shared a refrigerator and a set of habits. Now you learn to cook for yourself on the nights Claire is at her mother's, which is the hardest category of night. You learn that you can get surprisingly far on pasta and the specific determination not to call anyone and admit how quiet the apartment is. You go to Claire's school events. Her mother goes to Claire's school events. You sit on opposite sides of the gymnasium and you watch your daughter do the thing she's doing. A recital, a science fair, a graduation from 2nd grade. And you are both proud of her and you are both present for her, and you never sit in the same row. You get good at not making it weird. Claire never has to worry about it being weird, which is the only goal. You date someone for 4 months in your 2nd year alone. She's funny and warm and interested in things you'd forgotten you were interested in. She ends it before it becomes serious. She says she can tell your heart isn't all the way in it. She's right about that. You thank her for being honest. You mean it. You sell the house in October. It sells quickly, which should feel like a relief. It doesn't feel like a relief. It feels like watching someone drive away in something that had your whole life in it. Level 8, the years after. Claire is 9. She is doing fine, which is the only sentence that matters and also the one that contains multitudes. She moves between 2 houses with a specific adaptability of children who have been given no other option. She has a room in your apartment that she has made entirely her own. She has a room at her mother's house that is also entirely her own. She carries a backpack between them every week that contains the things she needs from one world to the other. She has learned to live in 2 places. That is not nothing. That is also not everything you wanted for her. You are 38 years old. You have a job you're good at. You have an apartment that now, finally, feels like yours. You have friends who know the real version of your last 4 years. You have a therapist you see every other week, not because you're in crisis, but because you've learned that maintenance is cheaper than emergency. You've gotten better at the quiet. The nights when Claire is at her mother's used to feel like something being taken from you. Now they feel like time. You've learned to use time differently. You call your daughter every night she's not with you. Always at 8. She knows it will be 8. She picks up every time. Those 8 o'clock calls are the fixed point of your week. Everything else gets built around that. Your ex-wife is doing well. You know this because Claire tells you, and because you can see it when you do the pickup and drop-off, which you have both gotten very good at, civil, warm, focused entirely on Claire. You are not friends. You are something that doesn't have a word yet. The parents of a child you both love. That's enough. That has to be enough, and mostly it is. You run into someone at a bookstore in November. She's looking at the same shelf you're looking at. You talk for 20 minutes. You find out she's divorced too. 2 years out, 1 kid. She laughs at something you say, and you notice that you feel something that you'd forgotten you could feel. You get her number. You don't call for 2 weeks because you want to call from a place of actual readiness and not just loneliness. That distinction took you 4 years to learn. Level 9, the other side. You're 43. Claire is 14. She is a person in full, which is terrifying and astonishing in equal measure. She has opinions and friends and a phone she won't put down and a specific eye roll she deploys when you say something that dates you. She moves between your home and her mother's with the ease of someone who has been doing it her whole conscious life. It is her normal. You have stopped grieving the normal you wanted for her and started respecting the normal she built for herself. She asks you once, when she's 13, if you and mom were ever actually happy. You tell her yes. You tell her genuinely, not as a performance of positivity. You were happy. The marriage had good years, and you mean that. She nods at this like she's filing it away. A year later, she asks you why it ended. You tell her the honest version, age-appropriate, without making her mother the villain or yourself the victim. It's the hardest conversation you've ever had with another person. It's also one of the most important. She thanks you for being straight with her. That kills you in a good way. You've been with someone for 2 years. Her name is Rachel. She has a son who is 12 and who has decided, after a period of calibration, that you are acceptable. You take this as the high praise it is. You and Rachel have a relationship that is quieter than your marriage was, and also more honest. You've both been through enough to know what you're doing this time. You're both doing it carefully. That feels right. You are not the person you were at 26 standing at the altar not knowing what was going to cost what. You are also not the person you were at 36 sitting on a mattress on a floor in an apartment that smelled like other people's cooking. You are someone who went through both of those people and came out the other side. You're not sure you'd take any of it back. That surprises you every time you think it. Level 10, what remains? You're 51. Claire is 20. She's at university 3 hours away. She calls you twice a week, sometimes more. She came home last month for a long weekend and you cooked dinner and she told you about her life and you told her about yours and you sat at the kitchen table. The same kitchen table from the house, the one you asked for specifically. And you thought about all the conversations that table has held. You and Rachel got married 2 years ago. Small ceremony. Claire was there. Rachel's son was there. Your parents were there. Your father gave a toast that made your mother cry. Some things are consistent across the versions of your life. Your ex-wife remarried last year. You found out from Claire. You sat with that for a day and then you were fine. Not because it didn't matter. It did, faintly, the way old things do, but because you have built enough of a life that there is room for it to matter faintly and then stop. You look different than you did at 26. You feel different than you did at 36. You know things you didn't know at either age. You know that a marriage ending is not the end of a life, even when it feels exactly like that. You know that children are more resilient than you fear and more perceptive than you realize. You know that the kitchen table matters. You know that calling at 8 every night matters. You know that the space between what someone says and what they're not saying yet is where most of the important things live. You know that you failed at something that mattered enormously, and that failing at something that mattered enormously is not the same as being a failure. That took you longer than it should have to learn. You know that the Tuesday you met her at the birthday party was not a mistake. You know that Claire exists because of everything that happened after, and that Claire existing is the fixed point around which every other version of your life gets arranged. That has been true since 6:47 on a Wednesday morning when she arrived, inconveniently, and rearranged your chest. You sit at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning. Rachel is reading across from you. The house is quiet in the way that houses get quiet when the children they raised are mostly grown and living their own lives somewhere else. It's a different kind of quiet than the kind in that one-bedroom apartment. That quiet was an absence. This quiet is a presence. You drink your coffee. You think about everything it cost to get here. You decide it was worth it. You're not entirely sure that's true. But you've learned that deciding something is worth it and being entirely sure it's worth it are two different things, and only one of them is available to you. The other one was never available to anyone. So you drink your coffee, and you decide.